Well, can I empathize with this one? Are you one of the 38 million people like me in the country living with chronic migraines?
Luckily, no, but they can be debilitating, and Dr. Susan Hutchinson is a headache specialist and board-certified family practice physician. She broke down the top migraine triggers and explained a new treatment option, so take a look.
Yes, they're quite prevalent, Curtis. It affects about 38 million migraine patients in the United States in any given year. That's about 13% of the population. And unfortunately, it peaks between the ages of 25 and 55 years old.
And how about the triggers? Like what causes one of these to come on?
Great question. There are many triggers. The most common would be stress, hormonal changes in women, changes in weather, particularly drops in barometric pressure, dehydration, lack of sleep, sleep disorders, but those are the most common.
And a couple of those sounded like easy fixes, you know, lack of sleep and hydration, but what are some of the ways to prevent it before it starts besides that?
Yes, great question. Well, in particular, if we look at the weather-related trigger, which particularly is the drop in barometric pressure, this affects quite a few migraine patients. So one of the things I wanted to mention today is the use of MigraineX. It's an ear plug that has a filter in it. It can help adjust those drops in barometric pressure, which can then, to a certain extent, help prevent migraine in those susceptible individuals. And I do want to mention it's best used in conjunction with the free app that comes with this ear device. And this can be downloaded and it can alert an individual when there's a predicted drop in barometric pressure. And that's exciting because then they can be proactive and they can put the earplugs in. And again, with that filter, it can help dampen and make it easier for that to be not as much of a change in pressure, which can then help prevent the migraine. So that's pretty exciting.
Yeah, that is exciting. I like it because it's not a pill or something you have to take. It's actually something just a kind of a homeopathic cure there. Where do folks get that?
Yes, you can actually buy it in a number of retail pharmacy chains like Walmart, Target. You can go on the website, which is migrainex.net. You can also order it through Amazon. And as a physician, I'm very sensitive to the cost of things, so I love the fact that it's about $9.99. It's over the counter, it's latex-free, because even though some of my patients need prescription migraine medication, it's so wonderful to offer some of these natural solutions as well.
And where can folks find the app?
MigraineX.net.
And a special thanks to MigraineX for bringing us that information. We'll be right back.